Welcome back to another edition of the Cart Barn Podcast. I'm Chris Lemley, joined by Greg DeWald, and we want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us again this week. A little housekeeping. If you are on YouTube and watching us, we would really appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button and give us a comment. Would help us out. Greg, we've got a really interesting guest this week, a repeat, John Morton from Birmingham. John is a golf historian and has some really good stories for us.
Yeah, he's the owner of Old Gray Tune Golf Books and Antiquities. You can follow him on X. You can find him, John Morton. Terrific guy. As I've said before, anybody that comes back for a second or third visit on to the podcast, we refer to them as friends of the Cart Barn. And John definitely is that. He's always willing and available to share time and stories. And this week, he shared a story about a cemetery in St. Andrews, a left-handed putter, and diving into the modern era, the new Amazon golf ball. So I think you guys are going to want to listen to that all the way through. And again, we appreciate you. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere on socials, and subscribe to us on YouTube TV. So let's dive in with John Morton, this week's episode.
Welcome back, everyone, to this week's edition of the Cart Barn Podcast. We've got a repeat guest this week. John Morton stops by for his second time. John, welcome to the Cart Barn.
Thanks. I appreciate you guys having me back, Chris and Greg. Good to see you guys.
Yeah.
So we call anybody that comes back a friend of the podcast because we figure if they come back, they got to be friends.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm still waiting on our schedules to align so we can tee it up together. But in the meantime, this is a good backup option.
Pretty
There
good.
you go.
Yeah, so I know you've got a lot going on. Why don't we just kind of dive in? You were at an event in Nashville a couple weeks ago. A lot of golf history discussed up there. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you were doing up there and what else you got coming up?
Yeah, I was up there in Nashville in Franklin, Tennessee, technically just south of downtown Nashville, for the annual national convention of the Golf Heritage Society, which is an organization here in the U.S. that helps preserve and kind of just dive into the history of the game. It's an organization that's been around for a very long time, and they get together for some small gatherings throughout the year, but they do one national meeting every year that rotates the locations. This year was in Nashville. Last year was in Pinehurst. The year before that was in Lexington, Kentucky. So it's a tremendous gathering, usually anywhere from 100 to 200 people that are there each year, just depending on the location and the kind of timing of it. But it was a really great week of different educational seminars and sessions, some golf for folks that had time for it, and then 2 days of a trade show, actually, where they had an entire convention center floor space filled up with just vendors that were promoting and selling artifacts, memorabilia, books, you name it, all about just golf and golf history. So it was a really fun week.
And what did you kind of? I know didn't you MC or speak at a couple events?
Yeah, I was up there with my company, Old Gray Tune Golf Books and Collectibles. I had one of the authors that I work very closely with, and I've got a great relationship with, Roger McStravick, who lives in St. Andrews, Scotland. He's the foremost expert on St. Andrews and the history of the origins of the game. He flew over from Scotland to spend the week in Nashville with me and a few other folks. So we had a couple different speaking events throughout the week. Earlier in the week, we had one specifically at Hillwood Country Club, private club there in the Nashville area, for their membership and the membership of a few other clubs that could come. Be able to have an evening chat with a historian like Roger was a tremendous opportunity for the membership. We ended up having, I think, 60 or 70 people at that event. He and I kind of went back and forth. I was, to your point, I kind of emceed the event. I helped kind of drive a lot of the discussion and drive a lot of the questions for Roger, and then obviously fielding questions from those in attendance as well. But we went on for about 2 hours, uninterrupted with no real guardrails. It was a tremendous evening. And then we had a similar type event at the Golf Heritage Society's convention the following day, where we had about an hour to dive into the same thing. Some of his recent works and research and the work that he's done. And then kind of just, talking a little bit about some of the history that he's uncovered and the significance of it. So it was a tremendous week to have him here in the States. And then he was also kind enough to stay for the trade show, so he was able to sign a bunch of his books for those that were in attendance.
When you talk to him, do you learn something new every time that kind of astounds you what he's been able to find out?
That is a really great way to phrase it. Every time I talk with him and we have some conversation about golf and golf history, I do indeed learn something. And it's the same with his books too. He's written, I think, 10 or 11 different books all on golf history, and every time I pick one of them up to go find and check or confirm some detail about golf history, I'll inevitably see something else and go, oh, I don't remember reading that before, and I learned something new out of the book as well. So every time I talk with him, absolutely.
You care to elaborate? Is there anything that really stood out on this trip that you learned?
There was one thing, and I actually had shared a little bit about this on my Twitter page last week, actually. For those that may not have known about it previously, otherwise. But one of the things, I went through his most recent book on Allen Robertson in advance of this trip, because that book just got released earlier this year. Allen Robertson very famously was champion golfer of the year in Scotland for 19 straight years, from 1840 to 1859 when he passed away. And his passing is what led to the creation of the Open Championship in 1860, and also where the term champion golfer of the year originated from. When the winner of the claret jug is handed the claret jug, they're named the champion golfer of the year very famously. Right. But in his book about Allen Robertson, I was flipping through just to put together a list of questions to be able to ask during those speaking events in Nashville. And I stumbled upon an image that I hadn't remembered seeing before when I initially or originally read through the book. And it was an image of the cemetery, an aerial view of the cemetery in St. Andrews, around the St. Andrews Cathedral ruins. And the caption talked about, in the 1840s, Hugh Lyon Playfair, who lived during the same time as Allen Robertson, he was the provost of the town, or what we would think of as mayor, and he had a lot to do with the expansion and the growth of St. Andrews in that early and mid 1800s kind of period of time. And one of the things that he did was he, in the 1840s, was asked by individuals in the town, by a group in the town, to create pathways throughout the cemetery. But this cemetery dates back, the cathedral itself dates back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So there were no pathways in this cemetery. But the pathways that we walk through today to get to Allen Robertson's grave and old Tom Morris and young Tom Morris's grave are the pathways that he created in the 1840s. But it was very controversial at the time because, and this is what Roger pointed out in the image that he shared in his book, it was very controversial because to create the pathways, Hugh Lyon Playfair literally had gravestones just removed and bowled over. So the pathways are on top of existing graves. And if you're walking through the cemetery today, you would not know that. You would not realize that. But that's quite literally how they created the pathways. And one of the graves that they likely, still speculative, but likely have the path created over was the grave of Allen Robertson's father, Davy Robertson, who was champion golfer for 5 years as well, from 1830 to 1835. So you have quite literally one of the open champions graves that's underneath the pathway that you're walking down when you're in the St. Andrews Cemetery. So that was something that, I had that memory refreshed of that fact in the days and weeks leading up to the event. But I had Roger expand on that for everybody at both of the events. That was one of the unique stories that I really wanted him to be able to expand on and tell, because it was, like I said, very controversial. You think during that time period, people would have been alive if Davy Robertson's grave was moved or his headstone was, removed to make way for a pathway. Allen Robertson would have been alive at the time. How would either of you feel if you found out that the headstone of your father was just going to be removed and a pathway put on top of it? So pretty controversial situation, but it's one that was necessary, in the grand scheme of things. And Hugh Lyon Playfair had to navigate that during his life.
I'm fascinated by how he was able to uncover that little tidbit, and also where those headstones ended up.
Yeah, I don't know where the headstones ended up, but the Davy Robertson piece or detail is, again, a bit speculative, but it's believed to be the case because Allen Robertson's grave is directly next to one of the pathways. And it was common practice at the time, as is still somewhat the case today in society, for a family to have a plot or multiple plots next to each other, and for the entire family to be buried in that plot. Kind of like with the Morris family. You look and it's just two graves, but you have young Tom Morris, his wife, his son, old Tom Morris, his wife, and several of their children, all just in the square footage of two grave sites, two grave stones.
Did Roger tell about how he uncovered that little tidbit?
He didn't expand on how or where he specifically found that out, but I know part of his research for the Allen book was digging into the archives at the the University of St. Andrews, right there in the town, and he was going through different court records and official records to be able to identify where certain individuals lived in the town in the early and mid 1800s. So I suspect he found it in those records within the university archive.
Pretty cool.
That kind of leads me to one of the things we talked about before we jumped on about golf history and this almost geeky subculture of people who are fascinated with golf history. I mean, to do that research to find out that possibility is, I mean, you go to a library and you just start diving into court records. That doesn't sound very appealing to most people, but a lot of us would find that fascinating.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and golf is very unique in that regard compared to really any other sport in the world, because in my opinion, it's because golf's history is so rich and so expansive. It's not like most other sports in today's society. You think of basketball, baseball, hockey, American football. Most of those sports go back maybe 100, maybe 150 years. Golf goes back hundreds of years, 600 plus years, as a matter of fact. So you think about the window of history of golf versus other sports, and there's just, I think, a natural connection that golfers feel to that history, whether you're a golf history nerd like myself, or whether you're just someone that enjoys playing the game. You have this natural connection to it, because if you're a golf history nerd, you can dive into, the history of the footpaths in the cemetery of St. Andrews. But if you're not, you can go visit St. Andrews and play the same exact course that Bobby Jones played, play the same exact course that old Tom Morris played, play the same exact course that Allen Robertson played, play the same exact course that every other famous golfer that's ever lived has played. Baseball, basketball, football, hockey, they don't have that connection because stadiums get torn down. But golf courses have remained. The historic golf courses have remained, especially in Scotland, obviously. And I think that's really the attraction for so many golfers and for the sport in general, too, our sports history. Because we can literally walk that same path, no pun intended.
Yeah, it's just it's so cool, and I'm by no means one of the geeks, but I love reading about that stuff. I would not go to University of St. Andrews and pour through court records,
Right.
But to read something that somebody did, to read about it is great. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you think about Swilken Bridge, the most iconic location in the game of golf, undoubtedly. With all due respect to Augusta National, Swilken Bridge is the most iconic location in the game of golf. In Roger's book about Allen Robertson, there's an image that was taken in the 1850s of Swilken Bridge, and there are a half a dozen golfers on or around the bridge. There's two golfers in particular that are standing on Swilken Bridge, and one of them, standing at the very peak of it in this image, is Allen Robertson. And then you think about 3 years ago, Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus sharing a moment standing on top of Swilken Bridge when there was speculation of would this be Tiger's last Open? Hopefully it's not. No, it's not. We didn't know at the time. But there's those two iconic golfers taking a photo at the top of the same bridge that we have a photo of Allen Robertson at the top 175 years ago. That type of connection, no other sport can compete with that when it comes to the enjoyment of the history of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really, and then of course they tried to put a cart path around Swilken Bridge. That didn't go over very well.
The Swilken patio, as it was lovingly referred to a couple of years ago. I think that was 3 years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, that was something.
What I haven't been to St. Andrews yet, but what's it like walking the streets of St. Andrews? I know you've been there and done it a couple times, several times.
Yeah, there's honestly walking around St. Andrews. There's there's an aura about it. There's a magical, mystical kind of feeling that you get when you're walking around the town, because the town lives and breathes golf. It really does. Just like Pinehurst does here in the United States, but with St. Andrews, it's a much richer and deeper kind of feeling that you get because it goes back so far. And in several different places throughout the town, you have plaques or statues of individuals, indicating or signifying where that individual lived at some point in time. Old Tom Morris, young Tom Morris, Allen Robertson, Jamie Anderson. There's plaques like that all over the town that as you're walking down North Street, you'll stop at a stop sign and turn to your left, and there's a plaque that says, "This is the house where old Tom Morris and young Tom Morris lived in when young Tom Morris died." And you have that connection that as you're walking through this town that is literally just a couple of blocks, to walk from end to end, to walk from the old course down to the cemetery, which is on the far side, it's no more than a 10-minute walk. So you've got everything in a very condensed area, and it's just got a magical feeling to it as you're going around.
How have they kind of managed to keep I'm not sure what the right word is, the tourist part out of that aura mystique?
Yeah, that goes back to something that I think is inherent to the United Kingdom and Europe as a whole comparative to us here in the United States, and that is architecture in general, and buildings in general are so old that there's a lot of preservation trusts that are in place to keep buildings from being torn down that have significance to them. But they were also built so long ago that it's just knocking a building down and building something different in its place is not something that's part of the culture in the United Kingdom or in Europe like it is here in the US. So you have all of that architecture of buildings that are 100, 150, 200 years old. Um, it's it's very powerful to be able to walk through a small town like that, let alone if you go to a city like Edinburgh or London or Glasgow or Paris, anywhere else in Europe. You walk around those big cities and you have that same feeling because they have. I don't want to say that we don't appreciate history here in the United States when it comes to architecture, but we are very quick to tear something down and put something in its place here in the United States, and they do not do that really ever. So it adds to the kind of flavor of the town, or the city, wherever you might be, because it's not a building that was built 6 years ago by a contractor that you know moved to the town 20 years ago. It's These buildings were here when old Tom Morris was alive, and that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, to your point about the relationship that golfers have with the history, and um, it's obvious that there's a lot of people that are interested in it. You posted this week on X. You just surpassed 5,000 followers. Is that
Yep,
correctly? Yeah.
that's correct. Yeah,
Congratulations. That's
thank you,
nice. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, I enjoy that platform. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well, but I enjoy X or Twitter a lot more because it's much easier to engage with folks, and in the golf community, generally speaking, it's a fairly friendly community to engage with online.
Yeah.
Generally speaking,
Yeah.
but the other thing is what I've found with connecting golf history to that platform is sharing short form stories. It is very easy for people to consume that information and that knowledge,
Hmm.
and that's why I love to put out posts that are shorter in nature, but communicate some type of short story. The pathways in the cemetery is a good example. I put on a post this past week about that, and it's very easy for someone to spend 30 seconds reading that, learn something new that they otherwise would never have learned, and all of a sudden that's going to stick with them. And maybe after 2 or 3 or 4 times of reading stories like that, it prompts them to go, man, I need to dig into this more. All of a sudden, I need to Google Alan Robertson, or I need to find a book about old Tom Morris, whatever it might be. So the short form stories is what I love most about X, because it gives people the ability to consume that information, that knowledge, uh, very quickly and easily.
Well, speaking of X and posts, you had another one. I think it was either last night or this morning about a little acquisition that you've made. You want to share, yeah, a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was fortunate to win a new item at auction yesterday. An auction pretty rare for me, actually, one that's actually based here in the United States, because a lot of what I acquire typically is from the UK. But I was very fortunate to win a new long nose putter, an antique putter that was made somewhere in the 1870s, so about 150 to 155 years old. But it's a putter that was made by Douglas McEwen. And McEwen, for those that may not be familiar with that name, MCEWAN is the spelling of it. It's one of the most famous club making families in the history of golf. They had 5 generations of men in that family that were club makers in the city of Musselburgh, which is right outside of Edinburgh, Scotland. And the McEwen family was very, very well known throughout Scotland, going as far back as 1770 and as recently as 1920. So it was very, very excited to win that yesterday. But the reason I was so excited is because I don't buy clubs very often. As you guys saw in my post, and I'll turn my camera here a little bit so people can see it behind my camera. I'm a left-handed golfer, and because of that, I only like to buy clubs for my collection if they're left-handed. Not that I'm going to use them, but just from a sentimental standpoint. So I only have a handful of left-handed clubs, turning it a little bit more, literally only 5 there on the shelf right now. But just adding a 6th, very excited about that because I don't see left-handed clubs come up for auction very, very frequently. So that was a really neat one to pick up yesterday.
How unusual is it to find left-handed clubs? And when you go back and you look at images or drawings from that time period, you don't see left-handed players.
No, you don't see left-handed players in the early days, at least within images and photos that remain today. None of the notable early golfers were left-handed, but the left-handed golfers did exist, just in a very, very small percentage, like much less than the 10% average that is generally used the society today. But the earliest club that I have is a similar long nose putter made about 1850. Not far, probably about a half hour to 45 minutes from St. Andrews, actually, in a small town. But there are some out there. I can't imagine there's too many clubs that are older than my 1850 club, but I do know there are some lefties earlier than that. But not many of them remain, certainly, that's for sure.
And I think since we've talked a little bit about history of the game, an overlooked aspect of that is the craftsmanship of those clubs, all the way up till the first metal woods came out, where that's something that's been lost in the modernization of the game. But now that's just mass produced stuff, there's nothing you're going to say that just stands out over like looking at a Tony Penna persimmon driver or a Ben Hogan persimmon driver or a McEwen long nose putter.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a craftsmanship. There's a personal touch and an artistry almost to clubs and early golf balls as well. One of the other things I had acquired earlier this summer was a feathery golf ball made by Tom Morris around 1850, give or take. And that golf ball, to be able to hold that and a feathery golf ball, for those that may not know, was literally made of 3 pieces of leather stitched together and stitched together with bird feathers stuffed inside of it. It was very labor-intensive work to be able to make it, and a good golf ball maker at that time in the early 1800s could only make 4 to 5 featheries per day. So if they were working an 8 or 9 or 10 hour window of time in a day, that means it's taken them an hour and a half to 2 hours to make one golf ball. Mm-hmm. So there's absolutely an artistry to those early tools of the game between clubs and golf balls.
What do you think the compression is on that feathery?
Ooh, that's a great question. I haven't. I refuse to even hit it with a putter. It is rather hard, though. I will say that. I won't touch it with my actual hands. I've got cotton gloves that I put on when I'm going to actually touch it, but it is a very hard and very firm golf ball. But I would be, well, there's no way in hell that I'm going to be making contact with it in any way, shape, or form.
It's interesting that you say it's hard because because it's called a feathery, right?
Yeah,
You would think it'd be very soft.
yeah. Nobody knows. There's no photos or videos of somebody making an actual feathery back in the day. There are modern ball makers that will remake featheries. The modern standards, but I I would have always thought, like you, I think that they were a little bit on the softer side. But
Yeah.
this one, I don't know if it was, the climate that it's lived in for the last 150, 175 years that they contributed to it. But it's pretty darn hard.
When you're going to auction, are there certain auctions that are better than others, and how much do you kind of the authenticity of items, do you explore that before you actually kind of really put in a serious bid on something?
I do. With as I alluded to earlier, a lot of what I acquire typically comes from the UK, England, and Scotland in particular. Um, with those, they're typically smaller, more obscure auction houses, and I'm going to do a rather significant amount of research about the item before the actual auction date, so that I can have a certain level of confidence that it's authentic. However, a lot of it with clubs and golf balls and collectibles, memorabilia in general, and artifacts of the game, a lot of it is being able to know what to look for when it comes to what characteristics a modern remake might have versus what characteristics an original version might have. But also just knowing the history of the game is a big piece of that as well. Uh, excuse me. That really just pertains to auction houses overseas that may not deal specifically and solely and singularly in golf memorabilia. However, there are auction houses here in the U.S. that do specifically and singularly focus on golf memorabilia. I don't question them at all because I know that they are golf history experts. I know that they are memorabilia experts, and they're only going to take on artifacts and memorabilia that are authentic. So you've got Golden Age Golf Auctions, which is one of those auction houses here in the U.S. They're based out of the Northeast. And then you've got a second auction house called the Golf Auction that's based down in Florida as well. So a couple really reputable and fantastic places to be able to go, and whether it's actually bid on and buy, whether it's to consign items to their auction, or whether it's to look at past auction results and learn the history of the game through their description. That's the other major benefit to these auction houses, is the preservation of the history of the item and the story of that item via the lot description. So there's a lot of good information that comes out of the auction house on that.
How how do they kind of determine pricing? I know what the price is what the market demands or something
Mhm.
like that. I'm not a marketing economic guy, but um, how do you put a price on the say the McEwen putter? How do you figure out? Yeah, it's worth X amount.
Uh, That's another good question, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And um, when it comes to things that there are multiples or many of, let's say Tiger Woods signed 2019 Masters flag. Um, you can look up to see historical data just online between either of those two auction houses or others that have sold 2019 Tiger Woods signed Masters flag, and see what the market is bringing for something like that. And you can get a sense of if you're overpaying or underpaying for it. But at the end of the day, if somebody really wants that, it's going to be for the appreciation of the item, and the price, I don't want to say isn't going to matter, but if they overpay by a few $100s for somebody that really wants it, they're not going to care. Now, to something like a McEwen long nose putter, um, I was able to find a few records of other similar long nose putters from the mid to late 1800s made by Douglas McEwen, and some historical sales of clubs like that in advance of the auction. So I had a general sense of what right-handed versions went for. But for somebody like me who's left-handed, that's going to give me somewhat of a baseline, but I can't take that as my only factor, because there might be another left-handed golfer out there like me that really wants it for their collection, and between the two of us, we may be willing to pay a lot more than what the right-handed putters have sold for, because we know there's not another left-handed putter that's going to come up for auction anytime soon, if ever. So some of it is just, internet research and finding, historical data of past sales. But a good bit of it is just figuring out what makes sense for you personally and financially, and how badly you want it. In the case of this putter yesterday, I was fortunate that it was an auction house that does not typically specialize in golf memorabilia. So practically for me, that meant that not as many golf collectors were likely following the auction, which I felt was going to put me at an advantage. And I ended up getting it for a price that was a little bit lower than I was actually willing to pay for it. So it worked out in the grand scheme of things.
Good.
I'll say it did. Now, you display that stuff, but will there become a point in time when you say, well, maybe I'll put this up for auction? Or
Absolutely.
does everything have a price in your collection?
Everything absolutely does, and I don't say that in a greedy way. I say that from the perspective of my mentality when it comes to collecting, which is I don't view myself as the owner of any one of these items. I view myself as just the current curator of this item and the current person that's responsible for preserving it until its next home, until it needs to find a new home that's going to appreciate it more than I do. Typically every few months, maybe every 3, 4, 5, 6 months, I'll take a glance around my home office and look at my collection and go, what doesn't excite me anymore in my current collection? And if there are items that don't give me those warm butterflies that I got when I first acquired it, I'll be very inclined to consign that to an auction house, or try to sell it privately, just depending on what the item is. But everything absolutely has a price, and my collection, I don't collect to hoard. I collect to appreciate, enjoy, and then eventually find a new home for it at some point in the future.
Interesting. Would that imply that there are some people that do collect to hoard?
I think there are collectors that collect because they want to keep it and they want to grow their collection. And growing your collection is not a bad thing, and hoarding I don't view as a bad thing either necessarily. I'm not implying that it is, but I don't collect to have my collection grow beyond my home office. I want this collection to be carefully curated and intentionally curated. So I know there are people that collect signed golf balls from professional golfers, and they're just going to keep collecting and keep collecting and keep collecting with no end result in mind. And not that I have an end result in mind, but I only collect until that item needs to find a new home, or that space can be filled with something that I appreciate more. That's the other aspect of it, is I want turnover to an extent of my collection, because inevitably there will be a time where I have something in, behind my computer right now, I'm looking at one of the oldest golf scorecards to still exist, a scorecard from 1824.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful to own that, and I love that scorecard to death. But if I were to find something that gave me the warm and fuzzies and the butterflies more than that did, and I was like, well, I need to sell that to be able to get to this, I'm absolutely going to sell that art. So it's just it's a different mindset than I think a lot of collectors take in any type of collector, any type of hobby.
Yeah, that is a different mindset than what I would have said. There's not a real attachment to the item from you. It's more of just, I enjoy collecting, curating, holding, and then once it's lost its luster, we move it and sell it and get something else that replaces that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The other thing that I'll add to that is a big part of the acquisition for me of these items is being able to share the story of them, being able to share the history of them. You know, when people go and they look through my Twitter feed or my X feed over the last few years, you'll see a lot of stories on there, short form stories, again, hint, hint, wink, wink, of items that I've owned. And when I shared the stories of most of those, I owned them at the time. But as I look around my office right now, I can tell you within the last 12 months, at least 60 to 70% of this has turned over. So it's not a financial thing for me. It's just a matter of appreciating the item, appreciating the history of it, sharing the history of it, and at the appropriate time, being able to part ways with it, knowing that while it's been in my stewardship and within my collection, I've been able to preserve the condition of it, and the condition hasn't deteriorated.
Yeah,
That's a major component of my mindset when it comes to collecting, is making sure these items are preserved and do not deteriorate.
well, you referenced the scorecard, and you shared earlier this year on the podcast with us. And if anyone missed that, you can go look that up. But I would also encourage you to give John Morton a follow on X, and also his company on X. And he's a really good follow. If you're not following him, I encourage you to go do that.
I appreciate it.
You'll want to buy something if you follow him or learn more. In that same vein, has Jordan, your wife, become kind of a geek wanting to, in the history?
I wouldn't say she has, but she's learning a lot more than I expected. She listens to me a lot more than I realized, admittedly. And a funny story for you on that front. She and I were over in Scotland back in August of this year, and we spent the first few days of our trip in St. Andrews. We were able to meet up with Roger McStravick, which was fantastic. We were able to, explore the town. We played a few rounds of golf. But at one point, we were walking down North Street from the old course down towards the cemetery. Because when we go over there, I want to make sure that I'm paying my respects to Tom Morris Jr., and Alan Robertson, at the very least, not to mention the other famous golfers in the cemetery. But we're walking down North Street, and I must have made some comment about some, tidbit, factoid about the history of the game. And she stopped in her tracks and she goes, "You've told me that before. I knew that. I already know that." And I go, "Oh, really?" And she said it in a very confident way. And I said, "Okay, all right." So we started walking again. I said, "I'm going to challenge you then." And I threw out a question for her just right off the top of my head. I thought about something and I asked her a question. And I go, "How many of his children did old Tom Morris outlive?" And that's something I absolutely would have mentioned at some point in the past. And without hesitating, she goes, "He outlived all of his children." She was right. She does listen to me. I was very excited. So it was definitely a light bulb moment for me that, she's not a golf history nerd like I am, but she's definitely learning and appreciating it more because of how entrenched I am in the history of the game.
Is appreciating, or just kind of, is that the correct word? She's appreciating it, or she just can't get away from it?
Appreciating, can't get away from it, putting up with it. Tomato, tomato. Uh,
Yeah. Well, do you have some other shows or events coming up?
Yeah, I've got a couple different things coming up here in the next few months, and a couple other plans in the works for my company, Old Great Tune Golf Book. Um, Coming up in January, I've got two different things down in Florida. I'll be attending the PJ Merchandise Show the third week of January in Orlando. But the beginning of that week, on Monday, the 19th of January, I'll be speaking at the first annual convention of the Society of Golf Historians, a group that was started by Connor Lewis, very well known on social media, on all different platforms of social media, the Society of Golf Historians pages. But he's putting together a day of golf history at his home club there in the Tampa Clearwater area. So myself and Stephen Proctor, well-known golf historian and author, Stephen and I are both going to speak, be able to talk all things golf history, have a little lunch, and play a round of golf at Connor's course. So that's going to be a really, really fun event that is open to anybody that wants to sign up for it. If you do want to look into it more, you can just follow either myself or Connor, again, under the Society of Golf Historians on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and he can share more about it. But that's going to be a tremendous event because Stephen actually just released his latest golf book as well, so he'll be able to talk about his
Yeah, I was
latest
gonna
work.
say Connor's a good follow on Twitter as well. Always throwing out information, and also Stephen is well known golf historian author. I think his recent book is The Match.
Matchless, yeah.
Yeah, Matchless, and dives into women's golf a little bit or a lot.
Yeah, I actually just got an early copy of it from Steven in the mail a couple days ago, and Jordan already stole it from me, so she's reading it first before I even can. Yeah, it's a book all about Joyce Weathered, Glenna Collette, and the rise of women's golf in the early 1900s. So tremendous work from Steven to be able to put that out, kind of dive into the early days of women's golf.
Cool.
Well, let's go in a 180 direction here and talk about something new, because you also posted a photo of the new Amazon golf ball on Twitter.
Yes.
And I don't see in 150 years somebody buying one of those at auction and being all giddy about it. But why don't you tell us about those and give us a early review?
Yeah, early review. Good timing for it because I just played my first round with them this morning, actually. So you'll get the kind of preview of the review, if you will. So yeah, Amazon very notably on social media last week or a week and a half ago now released a golf ball on their website, and nobody knew anything about it. There were no specs about it put online. There were no kind of previews or samples sent to any of the golf influencers or blog websites that do testing of equipment or anything like that. It just randomly popped up on Amazon.com, and it's under the Amazon Basics brand, so the very generic Amazon branding. And I quickly went on and had to buy a pack of them. So they were selling in 1 dozen packs and 2 dozen packs. So I, of course, bought a 2 dozen pack, and it posted last week. All right, let's see what all the hullabaloo is about, and what all the what all this craziness is about. And that post went pretty darn viral. I think it's had like 340 or 350,000 views. So pretty impressive numbers there. But just this morning, I had the chance to play with them for the first time, and I, as kind of a baseline for you guys and for anybody listening, I'm anywhere from a 2 to a 4 handicap on any given day, and I typically play Pro V1Xs. So I typically play a higher spinning ball, but a higher value ball, not something that costs $24 for 2 dozen. And I was pleasantly surprised overall. I'm not a low single digit handicapper that takes the game seriously. I really don't take it seriously. So driving distance wise, it seemed to be about the same, give or take, maybe 5 or 10 yards. The biggest thing that I noticed was the sound difference. The joke online that My Golf Spy made in their initial review of it was that it felt like a marshmallow, in their words. And I can confirm that. It absolutely feels like a marshmallow. It feels unbelievably soft. You almost don't hear the golf ball coming off the club face. It's so soft. And because of that, getting the feel, for your iron shots and wedge shots is at least for me this morning, using them for the first time, was quite difficult. So I did not hit a lot of greens in regulation. But I did like the way they felt. They seemed to perform really well, overall. I got to get a couple rounds into them, before I decide if I'm going to go full time on the Amazon Basics, bandwagon. But I was pleasantly surprised with the overall performance today.
And was Jordan playing with you? Because we know she's the real golfer in your family.
Yeah, I'm the hack in my family. Yes.
Did she play, and did she play the Amazon bomb?
No, she wasn't playing with me. I was just playing with a couple friends early this morning. She was playing with a couple of her friends a couple hours after me. So I think I just actually heard the car door. She may just be getting home now, but I bought them as a joke for her, knowing that she wouldn't play them. And for those that may not know, my wife is a former tour professional and a +2, +3 handicap today still. So she's very very set in her ways. So it's more of a joke for her, knowing that I would play them. But I don't expect her to actually go out and play any full rounds of golf with them.
Did you lose any? Just in case somebody finds one that a ball they've never found and seen before?
Yes, I lost 2. I had 2 swirly shots that ended up in water hazards. So 2 of them I donated to the golf gods.
So the old guys with the retrievers who fish them out will have a surprise, right?
They'll have a surprise. Absolutely.
Perfect.
It's not a surprise that has any value whatsoever. That's the difficult thing.
Greg had a retriever, but it's out at the shop being regripped.
It's funny you say that, because I've got probably 8 dozen balls in the boxes, and I'm still that guy that can't let a ball that I see in a hazard that I can reach go. I don't know what it is.
That's totally fair. I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. Again, I don't take the game too seriously, so I'm right there with you. If I find a random Strixon on the course, like, I'll play it. It's I don't care.
It's going in the bag, and I'm going to try it.
Yeah, I'm not playing in the U.S. Open. I really don't care.
Yeah. Chris has never thinned the shot in his life, so he wouldn't know about cutting a balata ball.
Yeah, right.
But that's a good place to let you get back to your afternoon. Again, we appreciate you joining us and providing the insight. Fantastic stories about the pathways at the cemetery. Love that.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys having me back on. Look forward to look forward to it again in the future, and really look forward to teeing it up with my new friends in the game, like you said earlier.
Yeah, we'll see you at the PGA show.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Thanks again to John Morton of Old Gray Tune Golf Books and Antiquities for joining us again this week. Great stories, great insight on golf history and golf memorabilia. Thanks again. And we got some great guests coming up. Not going to tease them yet, but you'll want to stay with the Cart Barn podcast to get some really, really good stories coming up, Chris.
Yeah. Again, thanks, John, for coming back on. Always enjoy our time with you. And again, guys, we appreciate you listening. The Cart Barn is continuing to grow. We've been downloaded in every state, the District of Columbia, and over 40 countries. And it's because of listeners like you. So Thanks again for listening. Catch us again next week for another edition of the Cart Barn Podcast.